Qualcast Nation, this truly is a privilege. We once had the Mrs. of Eudemonia, and now we have the OG, the founder, the CEO, Sean Hess. And Sean, first of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to see you again. Great to be here. And I'm sorry to represent the worst half of the marriage, but I'll do my best.
Hey, you've made some amazing things happen, and I actually want to take people back in terms of the genesis of this. I heard from Karina why Eudemonia came to fruition, but I want to hear from your perspective, because I got to say, as someone that took part last year, it was special. It really was
Thank you.
special, and I came out a different person personally. But what drew you to want to create this majestic event?
Oh, well, it's a bunch of actual things that have percolated around my brain for really a number of years. In no particular order. I mean, I think most currently, so I'm kind of starting going backwards in time. I mean, I think there are really two things that popped up for me that were the proximate cause, I guess you would say, to use some legal speak. One is really just that, I think COVID drove people into kind of some form of a madness or frenzy for good reason. It was a very difficult time. And I think during that time period, people really got much more serious about finding information themselves, really doing research themselves. And that came to be, I think, at least in certain political sections of society, became to be seen as a bad thing. You know, whether or not I agreed, I mean, I'm sort of more of a centrist myself, but the fact is that I never saw anyone's taking agency over their health as a bad thing. I always think that's a good thing. Now, obviously, people can be misinformed, but the idea that you would want to spend your time researching how to be healthier, how to live a more meaningful and fulfilled life, whether that's mental health or physical health, to me was always a really good trend. And so, I saw that trend and I thought, hey, well, what do people really need? Well, I think everyone's aware there's a lot of misinformation, and what they really need is to go to a place where they can commune with other people who are on this path with them, and then B, hopefully learn from different experts who don't all share the same opinions, but sort of see what works for them and see how they can continue to grow their knowledge in an environment where there's at least some vetting, and you can get up close and personal with these people. So that was definitely one big motivation, and I wanted to support that. I would say that the other thing, which is a little more political, is that I started to see, I think, a lot of polarization in health. People started to tribalize about their viewpoints, anti-vax and pro-vax and all of these things. And I just thought, if there's one thing that really should unite us, of course we're going to have different opinions, we're humans, but one thing that should unite us is health, in a lot of ways, just because it is the one thing you can say you have in common with everyone in the world, is the need where your life really depends in a lot of ways on how healthy you are, both physically and mentally, and the quality of your life. And so, sort of turning that into a political or tribal thing, it just really struck me as a very bad and dangerous trend. And I wanted to create something that would really foster dialogue and hopefully in its own way heal some of that divide, because in my experience, online dialogue tends to be extremely vitriolic and extremely poisonous. And that almost never happens in person. When you get people in person, the common humanity comes through, even if you disagree about something. And, I think, I don't know, you can take your health protocol. I think some are full of shit and I think some are great. But the point is that you get that in a room and it's like no longer hostile and it's no longer, tribal. And I really thought we could cure that to some degree, at least play a positive role in it. So that was another motivation. And then, last but not least, I suppose just, I've had a passion for this. I started, as you know, Quad, I mean, with Wanderlust, that was another company I co-founded, probably the OG wellness festival out there, more centered around, I suppose, yoga and meditation and personal spirituality and things that are, less science-based and more, practice-based or philosophy or spirituality-based. And my personal inkling has always been a little more scientific in terms of the way my brain works. And so I was really just personally interested to gather, PhDs and researchers and medical doctors and people who really knew their shit and put them in one room and learn from them. And I felt that other people would share that interest as well. So here we are.
Here we are. going a little bit off script, Sean, I feel like there's
Yeah.
an itch there for you
Hmm.
in terms of health, whether it's protocols or approach to spirituality, your own health. What what itch has been really scratched on this endeavor?
That's a very good question. I don't know that I would say, I mean, I'm not satisfied yet, so I'm not sure I've scratched that itch. I think, launching, it's funny if you want to think about optimizing and, there's a whole set of people who come to our event that are, they'll always be optimizing, and that's what they're doing, in their health protocols. I'm not really like that personally in my health protocols. I mean, I do feel like I am, and I'm on a progression, I think, in life. But with events, I'm always dissatisfied. I always feel that I haven't done it as well as I want to, or I wanted to see even more and see more magic. And of course, I'm aware that it seems that objectively people like you and many other people have told me they really enjoyed the first year. And I think that was great. And I think we can do it better. I think we can have deeper conversations. I think we can have more meaningful impact. I think we can expand the impact to be sort of more 365 and not just, during the days of the event. I'm just very excited about a lot of things. But yeah, I mean, I think that what I wanted to do was to play a role, not so much myself, but have an effect on the conversation around health and really become part of a group of people that I think are trying to, first of all, have good intentions, are trying to advance human health. And then, second of all, who are willing to have dialogue and discussion, be open minded, and sort of embrace a larger diverse community around that. And I do feel like we did that in the first year, and that was satisfying. I just think there's much more to do.
I agree in terms of the ability to have that open dialogue last year. That was refreshing, to be honest with you, because coming from a perspective where, I mean, at a personal level, I was fairly vocal about certain things during the pandemic period, and that was
Yep.
scary as fuck. And there was some
Yes,
things
can
I
imagine.
still would hesitate to say in a public sphere. But I'm curious in terms of, does some of the information that, in terms of the health space, is there some that come to mind that were more um, stronger, or I'm not sure the right term, but that were more front facing, that you felt eudaimonia was able to at least take a chunk of?
You know, I wouldn't presume to say that. So I'm not sure that anything really changes people's minds when
Oh,
they've really made up their set, and so that's not really the goal. I think the goal for me is actually more one of toleration, understanding, and sort of common humanity, and really humility. The humility for me, and you'd know this as a medical doctor, but sure, but is that, we are all bio individuals, right? And so in our own sense, like, there are practices and protocols that may work for me that don't work as well for you. There are drugs that I have an adverse reaction to and you would not. There are so many things out there that are prescribed, based on some lab center mix of of a parabol or of a curve, and that's just not how health works. And so I just feel like if we can get to a place where people can talk honestly about what has been effective for them. People can talk about risks and dangers openly and make educated decisions about what they still want to try or not. I think that is more what I want to accomplish than saying that you're going to walk into Eudaimonia and change your mind. I mean, I will say that we have also tried to avoid what I consider to be the dogmatic fringes. And, I'll go out, on a limb here. I mean, I have, I think, certain questions about certain vaccines, and certainly about the vaccine schedule, and about, whether all of them are necessary at all times. And I understand there are many complex reasons why they're recommended. But, I am no anti-vaxxer. And I think we have tried to keep out voices that are just completely on the fringe of anti-vax, not because I don't include them in our community, but just because I think that type of, let's call it, extremely dogmatic view is going to be counter to the general fostering of a open dialogue that I'm trying to create. And I would say there would be equivalents on the other side of the political spectrum, by the way, or whatever you want to call it, the thought spectrum of health. So I'm not meaning to single out those folks. And frankly, I tend to skew very libertarian in my sense that, hey, people are entitled to their beliefs. And while obviously that doesn't mean that they should necessarily represent the public health policy of the country, I'm also, not one to try to mandate particular behaviors except in unbelievably extreme circumstances. So, I don't want to judge, but what I do want to do is I want to bring in voices that are open to rational thought and debate and open to considering ideas brought to them by other people that are around them. And I think that's the center of the conversation that most people inhabit, and that's who I want to bring there. So, what I hope people leave with is not necessarily that somebody blew their mind or changed, their mind. I don't think that's going to happen, but hopefully that they're a little more open, they're a little more willing to consider, and to be honest, have a little more humility in how they view some of these practices. Because I think people tend to be very dogmatic in general, about health in particular.
Yeah, I feel that's the same way because it's easier if you're black and white with some approaches, and there's less thinking, and then
Right.
it's just easier. And if I've learned
Yeah.
anything on over the years as a practitioner, you're dead on in terms of there's a personalization aspect to all that
Hmm.
we offer people. Like if you, I always give this example that if you take aspirin's good for you, or it's not supposed to be proven for primary prevention, but that's for a general population, not accounting for any kind of nuance, like whether it's your, no assessment of your microbiome, no assessment of whether you've been on a specific medication beforehand. It's the general population. So maybe in
Right.
your case, as an example, based on your profile, it might be very effective. But we don't do our study design that way. We don't ask ourselves what population would this benefit from the most, if there's going to be any benefit at all. And so one thing that I truly got that sense from last year is, hey folks, here are several tools for getting healthier physically, mentally, spiritually, and adapt what resonates for you. This is, we're not,
Hmm.
nobody's saying this is the end all be all. And I really appreciated that from last year's conference.
Cool. Well, I think ultimately the question of a lot of this stuff is does come down to the subjective question of how does this make me feel? And
Mm.
I mean, if I'm, cold plunging every day or I'm eating keto or whatever it is, and I feel great, and, you know, sure, obviously, you want to do blood work and you want to make sure you're not, there's not things that are out of whack or whatever. But in general, that's a pretty good indicator and maybe the best indicator we have that something's working for you. And that's just okay. Like I just really think that there is, and maybe we don't know all the reasons why, whatever this X diet or this protocol works yet. But the point is, if it's working for you, that's why. And so I'm also, wanting people to be exposed to new things and maybe things they haven't heard of or things they haven't tried, because you never know. One of those things might just, change their life or make them feel wonderful or, give them energy or whatever. That's the real goal. The real goal isn't, of course, the real goal is you're hoping that 30 years from now you'll still be alive, right? And that not only you'll be alive, you'll be healthy and you'll be enjoying your life. But that's very far in the future. There's a lot of things that 3 months from now could make you feel better. 3 months from now could have caused you to lose that excess weight or to recover from an injury. And I think that these are the little things that I'm just wanting people to be more active and involved in. I can use myself in a small way. I'm not, despite running this conference, I don't think I'm not on the cutting edge of experimentation on myself. I'm not a biohacker per se, but I did have a really serious knee injury from tennis, a degenerated, macerated meniscus in my right knee. And it wouldn't heal. It was 2 years. My knee, I have a huge Baker's cyst. There's just swelling all on my knee. And it was like really bumming me out. My life was actually qualitatively worse because of it. And I had a buddy who and had success with peptides. And, he was like, listen, you should give it a shot. And I went to two doctors first and I got two opinions, and everyone said, well, it's basically inoperable. They can't really do anything. And we don't recommend it because if we do operate, you'll get arthritis in your knee, in some reasonable time frame and need a knee replacement. So I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. It's been, I mean, again, it's an N of one, right? So I don't know that my knee healed because I started using, BPC 157 and TB 500, but it's definitely much better. I mean, radically better. I can do deep knee bends. I can ride my bike. I can play tennis. And this is in, honestly, a 6.5 month treatment after over 2 years where nothing worked. And so, again, this is not for me to proselytize about peptides. I think they need a lot more study, and frankly, wouldn't have taken them if I had any other alternative, because that's just my natural belief cycle. But for me, it really worked. It really helped, or seems to have helped, as best I can conclude from an N of one study. So anyway, that's a good example of something that I just feel like, there are many things out there that are, on the cutting edge, or still haven't been studied, or, you have anecdotal evidence. And, I think obviously you have to look at the risk profile, but I did do that research and it seems that the risk profile is fairly low with these things. So, I gave it a shot. And I think this is the kind of viewpoint that I would like to encourage in people. Not that you do what I did, but more that you find your own comfort level with trying new things, and more that you're actively searching for things that might improve the quality of your life. Because, I'm 55 and I didn't really want to spend 10 years not being able to ride my bike or play tennis. I mean, it was really important to me. So anyway, I think everybody has some story like that to tell.
And it makes me think too, Sean, about who's coming or who should come. Because
Mm,
I'll be honest with you, before I got to witness it in myself, I was expecting a bunch of just straight up biohacking fiends to be all over the conference. But who who should come? Like let's spell it out. Like who like what's fair game for folks?
yeah. Well, I mean, I will say one thing. I very, very consciously designed the event to not be a biohacking summit. That's not because I don't like or respect biohackers, love biohackers. I have, as I just told you, a sort of biohacky story about myself. I mean, it's not that at all. It's just that I see it as broader than that community. That community is, very much an optimizing, tech forward, community. I don't think that community has spent a huge amount of time thinking about mental health and how to optimize that, or as much comparatively. I think that there are communities like my OG Wanderlust Wellness community where, yoga and practice and meditation and being in nature and all those things are extremely valued. And, they're not biohackers. And so like my thought was, hey, there's like categories of things. There's biohackers have some wisdom. There's ancient wisdom, which I think of yoga and meditation and psychedelics and things that might be in that category. There's modern medicine, which is also a form of magic and which gets, I think, roundly criticized, and many times I think unfairly, in the community of wellness and biohackers. And I don't think that's correct either. There are a lot of things that one can learn, obviously, from your world and from the world of people who have, actually educated themselves on the latest in, Western conventional medicine. So, all three of those things I wanted to bring into the conversation. And I felt like that would be the really interesting kind of rub, because often these three groups I felt like lived separate lives with separate information sources and maybe a little bit of disdain for one another. And I thought that, all three have really interesting information to share and practices to share. And maybe we could get a dialogue going and, take the best from all.
Absolutely. The other component, Sean, that was awesome was like there wasn't just the didactic, let's hear what these experts have to say, but there was an active component to Eudaimonia, which, to be honest with you, like was one of my highlights.
Yeah.
Being front and center with Jillian Michaels doing her thing. That workout was sinister. I don't know if
Yeah.
you got, but
No, I
wow.
didn't get to do that one, but she's a powerhouse. She's
But she,
amazing.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
this is another component to Eudaimonia that I can't be understated for sure.
Yeah. Well, that really comes from the wanderlust side of things. I mean, well, it comes from a couple of things. I mean, first of all, I just think conferences are boring, most of them. And I didn't want to make a boring conference. I just, that's just a personal thing. I don't like, though, that's all I do right now for the last 3 weeks is sit in my office chair and type emails. But in general, I don't like to just sit. I like to move. I like to do. I like to touch and experience. And I think, making Eudemonia tactile was a huge goal, but also, you know, movement and mindfulness, however you want to slice it, are very, and that's like the larger category. We have strength training, resistance training, cardio training, and then, a whole mindfulness program and things like restorative treatments, sound baths, and God knows what else. All of that stuff is also critical, I think, to, some element of that is going to be part of everyone's wellness regimen, no matter what. And so the idea is like, why go to a conference that is about health and wellness, broadly speaking, and then not be doing the physical and mental practices that are very much part of that? I mean, of course, it seemed like it had to be there. We also have all those treatments, which is the other thing I think is fun. I always think of it as like Disneyland for health tech geeks, like the immortal chairs and the, conscious therapy and the PEMF machines and all the stuff that we have there. We have a MRI scanner coming, like for full body MRIs this year. We've
Really?
just got amazing stuff there. That again, you don't necessarily get to try in your normal real life unless you're a member of one of these $100,000 annual health subscription things. But so we bring all that there too, and I think make it more accessible. So yeah, I mean, I really do think that the idea is that this stuff should be fun, and it should be fun to attend. And if it's not, why would I go? It's that
Right.
simple. Yeah.
100%. So with this year's lineup, so, or the not just the people that are going, but some of the, as you mentioned, the activities, the treatments. What is Sean most excited to see or experience?
Yeah, I am I feel like I'm unfortunately the one thing I really miss out on is the full depth of the conference I create, because I'm running around like sort of sampling experiences all the time. Just in terms of like I get to drop in for 4 minutes here and I get to drop in for, 6 minutes there. But with that said, I don't know. I mean, just trying to think what pops out of my head. I mean, super excited about the Gracie brothers coming to sort of teach a mass jujitsu class. I think it's just really cool. They're amazing humans, and I think it's such an amazing, like, the martial arts. Even though I'm not really a practitioner, have always kind of intrigued me. So I'm very excited to drop into that. I don't know, Andy Galpin, somebody I followed online, never really gotten to work with him and see him as sort of expert on, muscle training and health. And I think he'd be really cool. Arthur Brooks is a guy who I read about a lot, very different, sort of actually talks about happiness in eudaimonia itself, the concept of life well lived. And he's a really interesting writer and speaker. I'm very excited to see him. I don't know, OG Rick Doblin, MAPS founder, psychedelic researcher and leader, a very, very interesting guy. So super excited for him. But, the truth is we have 160, 160 talent. My wife, I mean, she's regularly berates me at night because we booked so many people, and she's just like, how did you do this to me? I'm like, it wasn't my fault. You booked most of them. But anyway, yeah, we have just an incredible lineup of people that are really leaders in, various diversities. Bob Thurman, that's another one just popped in my head. Buddhist scholar, incredible. Actually, he was teaching at Columbia when I went to Columbia a long time ago, but never actually got to take his class there. So hopefully get to meet him and hang out in person with him too. So yeah, there's just a lot of highlights for me. Whether I get to actually experience them is a separate question.
Oh, man, like, not that you're gonna take advice from a lowly dog like myself here, but you got to,
Lovely.
bud. Like, you can't create some magic like this and not be able to really, like, you got. I mean, you're gonna have to obviously choose your spots, but you got to experience this. Like,
Yeah.
I, I, I gotta say, like, the amount that I learned in a short period of time, and I didn't go there thinking of being a consumer. Like, I was hosting a panel on menopause at the time, and I obviously got to learn a lot from our panel. But I remember going in with Cynthia Thurlow and hearing her talking about fasting and having some components to that I'm like, oh, being ironically less dogmatic about the benefits of fasting. There was, as I mentioned, Jillian Michaels, JJ Virgins, and that talk with Gabrielle and Huberman
Mm,
was
yeah,
awesome. And
he's
just
great.
like,
I
I mean, he's got a gift, man. Like he's just got a
He
gift.
really does. There's something like there's a charisma to the guy that actually, I guess it comes across in his podcast because why else would he be so huge? But it was really neat to see him in person. I thought he was like really pretty lit up about the ideas that he was talking about. It's just like really neat to see that kind of human passion come through, you know?
Absolutely. And just it's motivating. I don't know. Also as a person that puts out content that, with that level of energy, and sometimes you feel like people get lost in the weeds, and so you're afraid to give a little bit of nuance sometimes to these conversations. But if anything, I don't know, I felt more empowered after experiencing eudaimonia, and this year even more so. I'm so excited. Like I'm just gonna say selfishly, Arthur Brooks, I think this is one I'm really really looking forward to. His book, the one that I'm forgetting the title of the book, but Oprah was part of it, if I'm not
Mhm.
mistaken. It just it just opened my eyes to like what our goals should be when it comes to aiming for happiness. I just think the you can't understate enough having that much game and talent in one building.
Mm,
Like, it's just magic. Like, just you could
yeah, it's pretty
feel
cool.
the magic when you walk in. Like, when you walked into the auditorium with, Gabrielle and, like, I think you gave the intro, right? Like, you were on the mic.
Yeah, I
But
believe so. Yeah.
yeah, and then our boy Huberman busts out. Like, you could feel that energy in the room, the thirst for knowledge. People weren't on their phones. You know what I mean? They were, like, invested. That was, I don't know, that in and of itself was worth the price of admission as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. I will certainly endeavor to attend my own conference. I would say that it's that it's tough sometimes. Just I mean, for a couple of things. I mean, first is just, of course, there's a lot of social demands of like meet this person, talk to that person, be here now. And of course, the other thing is that we have, at any given moment, 20 venues that are happening simultaneously. It's really only those keynote talks where you get to all come together at the end of the day. Which, by the way, I love the idea that you were splintering off, getting lit up with all these ideas all day, and then you can come together as a community. It's sort of at the end of the day. That's very much a piece of design. But I would also say that about myself, it's actually kind of interesting. It's like how we find jobs that maybe find our way to jobs that suit the way our brains work. I mean, I'm very much a generalist. I've always been a generalist. I'm interested in a lot of different things and kind of never had that thing that I feel like, oh, this is the one thing. But what I have discovered over time and become very comfortable with is like, boy, I just want to find things where I can get the spark of interest and curiosity in a ton of different ways. And in a lot of, so I suppose to some degree, my ability to drop into this moment and that moment and the other thing is really, satisfy some deep urge in my brain and how I like to go through the world. So it's not all bad, although I do very much hear you're totally right about that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Sean, we're throwing down November, if I'm not mistaken, 13th to 16th. Am I getting that right? Or
Yeah,
14th? Yeah,
that is
13th.
that is correct. The 13th is really just a welcome day. It's like people arrive and there's a party at night, a toga party, by the way. Of course, it must be with a Greek theme. And then the
Obviously.
real conference is Friday through Sunday. So that's sort of the bulk of it. But yeah.
Amazing. Amazing. So, where do people learn more? Where can people get tickets? We'll have links obviously in the show notes. But where can people learn more?
Yeah, I think we've attempted to explain the scope of this very large and diverse event at eudemonia.net. And that's, of course, EUDEMONIA. Since we couldn't pick a name that anyone could actually spell or pronounce, that's that's what we've ended up with. I find myself spelling it and pronouncing it for people. It's literally, actually, it's hilarious,
Welcome to my
Quad.
world.
We had, yeah, well, exactly. You understand. We had to advertise the conference in sort of in and around the Palm Beach area, and we ended up doing a radio spot. And we realized we couldn't use the web address because literally no one would either remember it or know how to spell it. So we bought, I think, westpalmexpo.com because and pointed it to eudemonia.net because we realized it was a hopeless cause on radio. So yeah, branding maybe isn't one of my great strengths, I guess, but here we are. The concept behind life well lived or human flourishing was just too cool for me to pass up. But hopefully Arthur Brooks will tell us more about that when he talks.
And listen, people are going to recognize the name. Just give it
Yeah,
a
we
minute,
need a
and
little
people
time
will
on
be
that
like,
one, though.
yeah, people
Yeah,
will be
yeah,
rattling off and spelling
yeah.
before you know it. But Sean, really appreciate you jumping on and talking all things eudaimonia. I can't wait to see you. It's gonna be killer, dog. It's gonna be wicked.
All right, Claude. Well, we're so glad to have you there again, and thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.